Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 13th Canadian Science Policy Conference. Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à la 13e conférence sur politique scientifique canadienne. My name is Peter Serles, and I'm a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering at the University of Toronto and a senior volunteer with the Canadian Science Policy Centre. I'm honored to be joined today for the 2021 Canadian Science Policy Conference interview series by Dr. Rémi Quirion, the Scientifique en Chef de Québec and the president of the International Network for Government Science Advice. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Nice to see you again, Peter.
Nice to see you. So this year marks 10 years since you were appointed as the Chief Scientist of Quebec, and congratulations on this amazing milestone. Throughout your time, you served as the chair for the boards of the directors for the three Fonds de Recherche de Québec, acted as advisor to the Minister of Economy and Innovation, and led countless initiatives on fostering research excellence within Quebec and with worldwide collaborations. Looking back on the past decade, what would you say are some things that you're most proud of, and is there anything that you would have done differently?
Well, very good question. And of course, I'm an old timer now. In terms of chief scientist in the world, I'm the longest surviving chief scientist, usually 6, 7, 8 years, that's about it. Proud of, I would think, and the pandemic, in a sense, helped there quite a lot. Science in the public, to have a face of science for the general public, face of science for government official, elected official, for minister, for high-level policymaker. So of course, we did not start from zero, but over the past 10 years, I think now many members of parliament in Quebec recognize that very much, as well as globally, worldwide. Done differently, if I could have maybe succeeded a bit more quickly on having what I would call maybe mini chief scientists in the various ministry and department of our government in Quebec. So to have a network right from the get-go of people, that's their daily job, to think about science and the interface between science, policy, science, and politics. So that when you don't have that, it takes more time. So if you had to start again, probably put more pressure to have that right from the get-go.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, your position kind of predates the federal chief scientist as well. So you've certainly pushed a lot of those directives and have done a lot over the past 10 years, which has been great. So your chief scientist report from 2019 to 2020 logically focused heavily around the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially the role of science advice to governments in getting through the major challenges that were brought with it. So looking now to the past year, as we've begun pivoting towards a post-pandemic recovery, what have been the new major areas of focus for your team, and where have you directed your efforts?
I think we're still in the pandemic. So all of us would have hoped that by now, with high percentage of the population vaccinated and all that, it would be much simpler. Well, it's still not. So we still have to deal with that almost on a daily basis. Certainly the Minister of Health in Canada and worldwide have to do that all the time. That's their 90% of their work focus on that. And for us as well, we still have to do a lot of that in terms of post-pandemic. What we are focusing on now is the impact of the pandemic on our population. Yes, of course, the virus, but also the mental health impact on our society that will probably have a long-term effects. So we have to study that and try to understand that better. Another one is on kids. We often say, well, the pandemic, not much in terms of the virus is not very, very aggressive with children. But of course, they have to going to school. You go there one day, the next day you cannot go because some of the colleagues other students are infected, you come back home. What's the impact of that in the long run? So we have created various structures in Quebec to be able to study that over the next 10, 15 years, probably. So certainly that's a big one. Another one, not just for us here, but I think globally, public health, investing in public health, taking very seriously warning that we get from public health so that we are much better prepared for the next pandemic. And if we say, oh, there's something strange happening in Toronto, well, you listen to the health care official, you listen to policy, to a public health expert, so that you can, these warning signs, the world over will take them seriously, which we did not do too well with the current pandemic. And of course, another big one that we'll focus on a lot is climate change. So of course, it's all over the place. It's another pandemic, very dramatic. How to handle that at the level of government, at the level of policy, not so sure. What happened with the pandemic, with the COVID-19 pandemic, you see people next to you in your family that are very sick. Some people die, so it's extremely concrete and urgent. Climate change, that's one of the challenges. Not easy. Everyone say, yes, we have that, but we don't see it as with the same type of urgency. So now we want to learn from the pandemic and see if we can adapt some of the things we learn in terms of link with the public and make it more real for a general public. What does it mean for me on my street in Montreal, climate change? What does it mean for my family? And how could they help there? So I think there the younger generation will be very helpful because they're quite concerned by that. So we have, of course, to have climate expert, but more and more we'll have to have social science expert, legal counselor, citizen participatory science, so that we start to grapple with climate change much more effectively than we have done so far.
And that's certainly something that your office is great at, seeing as it kind of oversees all three of the FRQ groups, which is very interdisciplinary. It touches on all of the different disciplines, kind of brings everything under the same umbrella to consider it as a global problem, a greater problem, rather than very segmented. And that's certainly one thing your office does very well.
Thanks.
So as of earlier this month, you've taken this new position as the president of the International Network for Government Science Advice, or INGSA, prior to which you were also the vice chair. And this is truly a well-deserved achievement on your behalf, so congratulations. And as the first Canadian in this role, you continue to promote Canadian science, as well as the role of government science advice in the global landscape based on some of these lessons that we've learned here at home. So can you tell us a bit more about what this role will entail and what you're most looking forward to with it?
Well, basically, I see it as a bit of a cheerleader for science advice globally. So INGSA is still a young organization with Sir Peter Glockman as the inaugural president. Now I'm only the second one. So now it's a bit more mature. We have over 6,000 members in more than 130 countries. And the pandemic, again, there increased membership all over the world quite a lot. So now what we'll try to do, and we have done since the beginning, is to continue to increase capacity in science advice locally, but also at the global level, all over the world. So certainly that'd be one. Another big one for me will be to make sure that INGSA is on sound ground, that the long-term sustainability of the organization, because it's always difficult to find support, financial support for these type of organization. Been lucky to have IDRC as a big partner, the Quebec government as a partner, Wellcome Trust in the UK as a partner, but we need to diversify. Now we have governance also, now we have a board, we elected vice president and all that, so that's great. And then two main priorities for me during my mandate will be science advice at different level of government. And when you give advice to WHO or United Nations, it's quite different from giving them to Canada, to Quebec, and more importantly, at the municipal level. So science advice locally, because often it's the local government, proximity government that have to deal with the challenge. Federal government, provincial government will say you have to do that to the cities, to mayor or not, but then often in cities, they don't have much, a bit of link with university and college, but in-house, very limited capacity. So we want to build that over the next little while. So to make sure that we have a network of science advice or science advisor affiliated with city in Canada, but globally. The other one is the cultural aspect of science advice. Of course, chief scientist, for example, is more of an Anglo-Saxon type of British model. And culture, the way you deliver advice, has a cultural aspect to it, a language aspect to it. So certainly we will create a network in the francophone world. So conseil scientifique dans la francophonie internationale. So we'll create that, and I hope it's only the beginning. We'll have also others maybe in Spanish language, only because culture has an impact on the way you transmit message to elected official and high-level policymaker. So that would be part of the job for the next little while, but I certainly will need a lot the member of INCSA to be very, very active. And I have a group of young scientists that are extremely keen to be involved, for example, on climate change. So I think we'll be able to make inroad there.
Excellent. And I could imagine that you're probably one of the more senior science advisors of the kind of global landscape with your 10 years of experience now. So it's great to be able to bring that into the kind of overall grouping there. Yep. So with that also, INCSA just held its 4th annual International Conference on Science Advice to Governments, which was hosted in Montreal. And it had the focus to build back wiser with knowledge, policy, and publics and dialogue. So what were some of the major achievements and announcements from this conference? And what were some of your favorite conversations that came out of it?
I think what we all know, but I think with the pandemic, we realized that even more, the world is very small. So what happened in one part of the world may have a lot of impact globally. So certainly there, as I mentioned a bit earlier, signal. So that when there is signal somewhere, say, oops, there is something happening here, you have to take it very, very seriously. And for that, you need network like INCSA and other type of network like that, so that very quickly you can communicate. So I think that's one. The other one, and that's not new, but for scientists, how to give advice to high-level policymaker and to elected official, there's still a lot of learning there, because of course, each of us have our language, and sometimes with the type of advice we give, they have difficulty to use them, to really take them into consideration in the decision-making process. And also on the other side, high-level policymaker, what kind of question do they have and what do they need in terms of advice? And sometimes, especially during a pandemic or emergency, I should say, they don't necessarily have time to think much about the type of question they have and they would like to have answer for, because everyone is running like crazy, like what we have done for the past year and a half. So also there, being able to have more, I would say maybe bilingual people, not French and English, but high-level policymaker that understand science a bit better, and scientists that understand high level. So maybe people that have joint training in these two worlds, and we'll try to have that. We are starting that in Quebec and also in other places in the world, so that you have this type of people that can be much more effective at the interface. So certainly that's one lesson also from the pandemic. But the good side of the pandemic, if I may say it that way, science is on the front page. So never been. So of course there is challenge with that, because when you're on the front page, people look at you much, much more, and you may have fake news or these type of things. But now it's for us scientists to take advantage of that, and make sure maybe we can advance science policy, for example, related to environment and climate change, related to poverty, related to all the sustainable development goals. I think there is an opportunity offered by the pandemic, if you would, so that science advice is now seek after by many governments. We had participants from New Guinea to India to Japan to European countries. So it was amazing to have participants from over 130 countries at the INCSA meeting, which is amazing.
Yeah, and as you said, I mean, bring science into the forefront with the pandemic. It's an opportunity. It also brings it under great scrutiny and a lot of kind of big challenges that come with it. But I think we've started to see, I think we're all aware that science would be kind of the only thing bringing us out of all of this. And we've certainly built that relationship with the public. So got to keep on that momentum and keep it going forward. So I was actually able to join the INGSA conference virtually. Another kind of benefit of the pandemic is to be able to join it from your own home. And it was some very great discussions to be able to see. So kind of turning our topic now, a few months ago, the FRQ really affirmed and continued its support for open science by joining the Coalition S, which has the mandate to implement immediate open access to scientific publications that result from research that's funded by the FRQ. And this is really an incredible initiative with substantial impacts for the Open Science Initiative. So could you tell us a little bit more about what this commitment means and what exactly it will look like in practice?
I think, and we had started discussing about that before the pandemic, but I think we saw with the pandemic, the vaccine story. Very open science, experts from all over the world working together and developing these vaccines, of course, based on 20 years of research on RNA, but still developing the vaccine very rapidly, very effectively, exchanging very openly. So it reaffirms our commitment to open science and free access to publication. So we're discussing a lot with colleagues in Europe, where it started, all that started with Plan S and Coalition S, and basically decided to join, decided not to be on the side of the pool and just watching what happened, but they will jump. And of course, they will probably make mistake because it's a cultural change. It's not a matter of, so yes, we adopted it, the three board of the Fond de Recherche adopted the Coalition S, but it's a matter, now it will take probably a few years before it is implemented fully. So we'll have to explain, we'll have to train, we'll have to see what it means for our scientific community, make sure that people understand the objective behind that. So that's what we are starting now. And discussing as well with the big publishing house, Elsevier, Krieger, Nature, and so on. So, okay, what kind of interface can we have with you? Because that you like it or not, the model is changing. So the business model is changing, so better to try to do that together than being a very, very confrontational. So Europe is ahead of us. They have started earlier, so we can learn. We work with them now. I sit on one of their committee, so we can learn from the good and things they did, the bad, some of the things that did not went as well, so that we are able to adjust it. But more and more groups worldwide are joining. We're the first government type of organization in North America to join, but now Gates is on board, our GUES is on board, and in Europe, CNRS, the European Union, UKRI in England. It's not exactly Coalition, but very, very similar, 99% similar. And the scientists that are funded by these organizations have to follow open science and free access. So scientists in Quebec, or for that matter in the rest of Canada, if they have collaboration with colleague in the UK or colleague in France, they'll have to go by the open access route. So better to do it early than too late. So it will, as I said, will take time. Member of my team will go around in university, in college, to talk, to explain, to train, and exactly what it means. And we don't want, and one of the key aspects is to make sure we don't leave anyone behind. And there I'm more, especially concerned by people like you, students, because they start in one model, say you have to publish a 5 paper in Nature or Science or whatever. And now the model is changing with open access, with open science. So the impact on the younger generation in this transition phase. So I think we have to be careful to make sure that we don't hurt anyone. And also depending on the area, in some fields, some disciplines, it's a matter of fact, almost open science. In others, not as much. So of course, we have also to be careful about that, but we are very serious and it will happen. It will take a bit of time probably, but it will happen. And hopefully the federal funding bodies will join very soon.
Yeah, well, it's going to have some growing pains. It's always the case as you switch models, but it's better to dive in and get those kind of lessons to learn very quickly and be able to push forward as soon as possible. So you've been a very long time supporter of the CSPC, and we're incredibly grateful for your attendance and amazing contributions to the Canadian Science Policy Centre. So what do you see as the most important aspect of the CSPC that keeps you coming back year after year?
Well, I think it's the reputation, the growth of the organization over the year. Remember when I first started the job, CSPC was a quite new organization. Some of us were, but again, yeah, that's very important to work with CSPC. And Merdad was very dynamic to make, but it was not easy in the first few years. But after that, the expansion, and now I think the CSPC is recognized, of course, in Canada, but globally more and more as one of the key players. And what I like very much with the organization for the young generation again, so that student can be exposed, they are volunteer, but also can give lecture, can be there, can meet people that have similar type of interest from all over Canada, but also more and more from other parts of the world. So I think a focus on the young generation is very important for me. That's one thing I like a lot from CSPC. I just hope now that we'll be able to go back with a meeting in person next year. Hopefully that will happen.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. It's certainly been one of my favorite opportunities to volunteer with, and to be able to kind of meet everyone at the in-person conference has been such a great experience and really valuable for me. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Quirion, for taking the time to chat with me and sharing your progress and outlook with our viewers. Congratulations again on your phenomenal career milestone and your new appointment. I believe the best place for our viewers to continue learning about your work is at the Scientifique en Chef website and ingsa.org. Excellent. Well, we're very much looking forward to having you as a panelist at several of the plenary and keynote panels of the 2021 Canadian Science Policy Conference in November. And thank you as always for your support of the CSPC and for championing science policy in Canada and globally.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Bonne journée. Bonne journée.
Hello.